Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. For those new to the channel, my name's Sean, also known as Film Guru, and I started this channel having my particular say on movies and a variety of film content, so thanks for joining me today. Sorry it's been a while again since I've done a video, it's just a bit hard to do them where I am. With the lead up to Halloween, I wanted to start to do reviews of horror films I really liked, old ones and new ones, but mostly the older ones that I really loved. A lot of them will be slasher films because that's my favourite subgenre of horror. But I will try and do a variety of them, and I will start to review particular movies within this genre. So the first cab up the rank, I Know What You Did Last Summer. This was written by Kevin Williamson and directed by Jim Gillespie, and stars Sarah Michelle Gellar, Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt, and Ryan Phillippe. The film really focuses on four friends, Helen, Ray, Julie, and Barry. They all have the rest of their lives ahead of them, and it's their last night of partying. They have so many hopes and dreams about the future. Each one of them have a different thing they want to do and ultimately escape the town that they've grown up in. After returning from partying, they ultimately accidentally run someone over. Thinking that that person is dead, they dump them in the water. And they make a pact of never to talk about it again. And then they go on with their lives. The film skips a year later. Julie is still struggling with what has transpired and the fact that she had to keep her mouth shut. And she returns back to her hometown after her first year at college. And she receives this letter that simply says, I know what you did last summer. Convinced that someone had seen what they had done a year before, they ultimately band together to try and work out what's going on. Ultimately, each one of them start to have an interaction with a mysterious figure in a fisherman's slicker and hat. They can't see his face or know who he is, but he starts to mess with them. And then they start to try and piece things together. And ultimately it's a race against time to piece things together to work out what's going on and who this person is before it's all too late. This film I've seen a number of times. I remember when I was in high school and people were raving about it and talking about it in 97. And I ultimately got to see it. I was really impressed with this film then, and I still am super impressed with it now. I would go as far as to say this is one of the best slasher films to come out in the 90s. I think it's cleverly done. All the cast are really solid of young up-and-comers all do a brilliant and fantastic job, and it propels them forward in their careers in a lot of ways, I think. I love the fact it's set in one location. I love that there's an accident that happens and they all have to keep their mouths shut because they all have something to lose. On this particular viewing, I saw a lot more in this film than I had in the previous times I have seen it. You've got Ryan Phillippe's character, Barry, who's this rich kid, and he's worried he's going to go to jail, won't be able to do the things he wants to do. Helen, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, she ultimately wants to become a model and an actress in LA. Model and actress in New York, but ultimately things don't transpire for her, but she has those dreams. Ray doesn't want to end up in trouble and locked in there and be blamed for something that it was an accident. And Julie has hopes of going to college and seeking a better life for herself. So they all have something to lose. And you can see why they choose to do it. Julie fights against it, yes, but she ultimately accepts it because I think she doesn't know what to do. And I think that's why she receives the letter, because she's the only one who tried to talk some sense into what everybody was doing and trying to do the right thing, but ultimately succumb to the peer pressure of the group. I like all the little bits and pieces with him messing with them, where he cuts off all Helen's hair in this really great sequence where she comes home, and then while she's in the kitchen and her father's distracted watching TV, the killer comes into the house. And as she makes her way back to the stairs, we just see him duck into a room. And it's this really great sequence. It's beautifully captured and well written and well done. I was really impressed with it. And there's a number of these scenes throughout the film I really loved. But that's definitely one I was impressed by. It's like he's sort of attacking the things that the people love so much or love about themselves in a way. Like Helen loves her hair, and he only cuts it off because of that in spite of her. But it also sets up this idea it could be her sister, like a red herring. And I kind of like that because her sister talks about the vanity of her hair in this particular sequence, in the sequence just before her hair is all cut off. Speaking of Helen, she has one of the best chase scenes in horror history, in my opinion. It is wonderfully done and executed and beautifully written. Yes, it is reminiscent of Scream in a lot of ways, but there's such a greatness to it. Where she's in the back of a police car and the cop's driving her home and he stops and he gets killed by the killer. And she breaks out the window and then she makes a run for it. And the only safe place that she knows to go is her father's shop where her sister should still be. So she runs there. And bashing on the door, her sister takes quite a while to open the door for her. And this is kind of reminiscent of Halloween in a lot of ways. Like Laurie Strode is knocking on the door, waiting for Tommy Doyle to answer it, while the killer slowly makes their way towards the victim. And I thought this was a really great reference. And even before Helen gets to the shop, we see her sister putting these plastic things over these mannequins, and one of them has a slicker on, which is a great setup for what happens later in the scene. Her sister ultimately lets her in, and she finds herself feeling safe, but ultimately the killer has made his way into the shop itself. And then as the sequence unfolds, Helen tries to escape out the door, and then the mannequin that's covered up is the killer. He jumps at her, and she makes her way out. There's a particular sequence in a window that I really liked, where she's on the second story. She climbs out the window, hanging on, trying to work out how to get down. Then the killer appears, and she falls backwards onto the ground, and then gets up and runs off. This is exactly what Kevin Williamson wrote in Scream, in the particular sequence where Sydney is hanging out the window and the killer comes after her. And you can see that Williamson was on a high after Scream, and sort of not necessarily copied, but it took stuff from Scream to put into this film. But I like that aspect of it. But the best aspect of this particular chase scene is as she's getting chased and running through the streets, she sees fireworks, and at the end of this alleyway there's all these people. She feels there's this false sense of security for her and for us as an audience. And we think she's safe, but ultimately, because she gets distracted, the killer attacks her. But what is also great in this scene is she doesn't just get killed and then that's it. She fights back. She really fights back. They gave her a really great sequence where she fights back and ultimately succumbs to the killer. But at least she didn't go out screaming or anything. She went out fighting back, and I really loved that. And it's a really great chase sequence. We don't have too many of these chase sequences in slasher films these days. And I really think they're important to the films because it sort of creates this sense of fear and anxiety in the audience. And you want to do that so they're invested, so they get drawn in. And then when the person gets killed, they're surprised or scared or upset by what has transpired. There's a sequence on the boat towards the end of the film which is really good. But each sequence and scene where the killer messes with them is really great. Barry gets chased by his own car and run over, which I think is a really cool scene. On Julie's way to go to Helen, she ultimately finds a dead body in the back of her car, which is really great as well. There's all these sort of really good sequences. I really liked also the scene where Julie and Helen go to David Egan's home, where his sister is played by Anne H. Anne H is fantastic in this scene. Nuanced and creepy and unsettling, and she's really great in this scene. This sequence actually feels a lot like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think that when Kevin Williamson started writing these horror films, he took a lot of references from other horror films. And this sequence really feels like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I really loved. It was a really nice scene. You got to see Anne H play a unique and quirky character that's a little darker than what she usually does, and I loved that. I thought that was great. And like I mentioned, there's a whole boat sequence at the end with Julie and Barry going up against the killer himself, Ben Willis. I really liked that sequence. I thought it was really well done. And it sort of adds something different to the film. And that's kind of what I've got from this viewing, is that this movie, upon more viewings, you start to piece things together. You start to see things you didn't see before, which is the same thing with Scream. And I like that. And there's something about Kevin Williamson's writing, the way he crafts characters and the scenes he writes are always really well done, and I'm really impressed with it. And I think this is definitely one of his better. I think this is one of his best written scripts besides Scream. It's kind of interesting. This was based on a young adult book, and when they bought the rights to it, the author was really pissed off because they ultimately just turned it into a slasher film, but that's not what it was. It's originally looking at young teenagers and an accident they get involved. It's definitely of the time of taking something like that and making a slasher film, because after Scream, slasher films started to re-emerge and the genre started to explode, and this is a follow-through of that. So you can see why they chose to do it that way. The only aspect of the film I didn't overly like is I find Jennifer Love Hewitt's Julie a bit annoying. All she does is scream and yell and carry on. Where you look at someone like Helen, I think Helen should have been the main focus, in my opinion. Not only because Sarah Michelle Gellar plays a brilliant character and does a really wonderful job with it, but it is because she's a far more interesting character. She has all these hopes and dreams, and in the way she sees herself and is presented. And I think that's why we had that long chase scene with her, because I think Williamson also liked that character as well. But I would have preferred her to be the focus. I like the music and the choice of songs in the film. I like it's really wonderfully shot and captured in these particular sequences. And it's just a really fun and entertaining horror film. Final thoughts. In the end, this is a film that really looks at the consequences to our actions, the choices that we make and how they affect us, and how there can be huge consequences to what has unfolded or what have we been part of or feel guilty for. And it's about trying to right those wrongs, I guess, in a way. And it's a film that really draws the audience in with really effective characters. I'm going to give I Know What You Did Last Summer 4 out of 5. Thoroughly entertaining and fun film. I got a lot out of it this time, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, or highly recommend a rewatch. And like I said, I'm going to do more horror reviews coming up with Halloween and Urban Legend and a variety of other films, and Scream, of course. And I'm going to start to try and do these once a week. I'll do a whole heap leading up to Halloween. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe to the bottom, follow my Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.